Hello, scholars. My name is Ira McIntosh, and this is Hypothesis. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to my office. It's time for another episode of Hypothesis. Oh, it's been a long week. It's been a long couple of months. It's been a long year, y'all. I know we are all feeling it, but that's okay. That's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're taking time out of our day to learn something new and talk to someone who is an expert in their field and is working on publishing new work to talk about that information. Today's episode, we are talking about equity and inclusion within classrooms. This has come up a few times throughout this podcast, and I'm sure will continue to come up on this podcast because I personally think it's important to talk about how people learn and how their learning environments can inform who they become. And how they view education in and of itself. So, don't be fooled. This is we're talking about new aspects to this topic, but we are talking about equity inclusion within the classroom. Again, we're also talking about how identity production occurs within classroom settings. This was kind of familiar to me because I'm used to talking about identity formation. My master's thesis looked at how people's identity formed over time. So identity production is the more psychological side to that equation. So it was really interesting to kind of compare notes between the sociological and the psychological side of things. And then we also talk about how one's perception of oneself can inform how happy you are and your willingness to work. So a lot of important topics that are wide-ranging and widely applicable to a lot of people. So today's guest is Jordon Millward. He is a PhD student at Imperial College London who is focused on understanding the life science students' professional trajectories and career intentions. His research aims to positively impact students' career paths, promoting a supportive environment for their professional growth. A proactive and engaged student, Jordon has been involved in outreach and student engagement projects through different roles, from a postgraduate research chair and student program partner to a governor in a school. One of his greatest achievements has been contributing to career and mental health initiatives for the school's science students and staff. Jordon is an enthusiast of alumni networks in which he has supported former and current students in their career development, and of social media such as Threads, Instagram, and TikTok as platforms for science outreach and discussion about academic career development and education. His entrepreneurial characteristics and belief in research impact led him to open Ask Jordon Limited in 2022, which offers consultancy and mentoring services around career journey, application revisions, and project management for students and academics within science and education fields. Another key element of his business is to support academics in developing courses based on their research for a broad audience, improving outreach, accessibility, and impact. As impact is at the core of his work, Jordon, together with his colleague Luke McCrone, secured a grant to organize this year's SEB Outreach, Education, and Diversity Symposium, Empowering Research for Community Impact. The event's primary focus was to bridge the gap between research and the community, support research impact, and empower researchers and the public, showcasing how this impact can be facilitated by the researchers. Jordon and Luke also ran an OED from Classroom to Community, Applied Frameworks in Action section at the SEB Annual Conference in Prague this year, which reinforced their engagement and commitment to the SEB, the OED working group, which Jordon is an active member of, and their beliefs. Jordan's efforts are also driven towards improving diversity and representation in the biosciences. He has been a part of the SEB Awards nomination task force and has just started a new podcast, Sitting Down with Scholars, to discuss different academic journeys. The SEB treasures Jordan's work and engagement and invites more postgraduate students and early careers to springboard their careers, disseminating their work and engaging with our opportunities. Everyone, please welcome Jordon Millward. No, so yeah, I try to be a little bit more professional with this podcast, but
Okay.
So cool. I'm very excited to talk about your topics because I feel like there's a lot of alignment in both of our research and what we're interested in, except we come at it from different directions. So I'm crazy excited. But before we do that, I like to ask my guests about their history in academia and what brought them to the point of doing a PhD.
Sure. So I'll explain it in full, but I will say generally it sounds a bit convoluted at the start. It makes a lot more sense when it gets towards the end of this, well, the end of the start of the story, I should say. So basically, originally I just wanted to be either a vet, dog trainer, whatever, something to do with animals. That was my main motivation. Couldn't do a vet because I have dyspraxia, so my hands are hack-handed, I suppose is the best
Okay.
way of saying it. I can do certain things, but I certainly you wouldn't want me operating on the dog. It's not steady enough hands for that, or so on. So it ended up being more behavior that I was interested in. So I went down the okay. So working in kennels, then going to the rescue centers and so on, getting all that experience. Also falling into various different flamingo ponds at the zoo when I was on work experience. But yeah, animal stuff is definitely for me. Went and did animal behavior degree, and one of the main things that I picked up from that is we had a placement year within it, and I thought, you know what, this is a great way of showing friends, family, and so on. No, I can make some money in this, and I can find a paid placement. Joke was on me. The paid placement in dogs, cats, and so on is next to non-existent. So I thought, oh, that was my first hurdle where I thought, you know what, this is going to absolutely. I need to drop out. I need to do something different. I'm loving the course, but if I can't get a job in it, what's the point? Uh, Luckily, I ended up pivoting into agriculture and working with poultry. I got a placement there on more of a welfare approach to that. So welfare and biosecurity. Actually, really enjoyed working in ag. Got a poultry scholarship as well towards that. And one of the things that I really found with that towards the end of the placement, where let's say, so 9 months they had a clear plan of what they wanted to do with me, and after 9 months, the remaining 3 months, they thought, what can we do with you? Because the project's finished. Your scholarships, this part of the funding is paid for 12 months, so we've got you for another 3 months. So started off with going around and basically being a dog's body delivery driver for a couple of weeks, but then they put me into a bit of a training side and actually delivering some welfare-based training to farmers and teaching farmers who are in their 70s who have been doing it for since their grandfather was doing it type thing is not the easiest bunch to teach, but found I had a real love for teaching. Decided to, after my degree, applied for a few other jobs as well, but then ended up going into teaching earlier than what I planned. Worked really well. I loved teaching in the land-based sector, so that was in further education colleges, so a bit like community colleges in the US. So teaching in those type of environments, and actually really enjoyed it, but kept seeing a number of the same recurring problems semester after semester with students, where they would say, "Oh, I'm really interested in this," but then not necessarily know what they need to get there, not know how they were going to pursue that particular career pathway, not knowing that that course isn't as well designed or well structured for that career that they're interested in. And then that brought me to my PhD. So I was doing my master's alongside that, but I found, while my master's did touch on it, the PhD was more really what an opportunity to focus on the career trajectories of life science students and effectively understand why the interactions that they have throughout their historic experiences, their educational experiences, really decide or dictate where they're going to go and in what shape they effectively approach that journey. And that's really my motivation for that, and it brought me to my PhD where I am now. I will say, on the other side of the PhD, there is a bit of a mixed bag. There's fellowship applications that I'm really interested in terms of pursuing like experiential learning, particularly like learning spaces, museums, and the opportunity for students to get that more embedded opportunity to feel part of the research community or academic community, or even just science in general. But there is also the other side of that where uh, you need a job after your PhD. And if a job comes up in a broader social science discipline and I do a bit of that, I will also be fully happy to do that because, as we all are, you have to go where you can't live hand to mouth. You've got to do something that.
Yep. Sometimes you just have to bite the
Oh,
bullet and go with what comes up.
exactly.
No, that's really interesting because I mean, I'm a city kid. I grew up, well, I guess not a city kid. I grew up in the suburbs, but I grew up in Seattle, and the suburbs are kind of basically part of the city. It's just all one giant blob. But my dad grew up in northern Idaho on a cattle ranch, and did the whole like sheep and chicken showing and such at the fair. And so I grew up with a very strong agriculture background from my
Hmm.
dad, as well as I always forget that my uncle is the head of the agriculture department at the University of Idaho. So I fully understand that my grandpa was a large animal vet for years and years and years and years. So it's just cool to talk to other people that have that experience because it's not something that's easy to explain to people in terms of what the lifestyle that comes with that and the information that comes with that. But I also think it's really fascinating that you got your undergrad in animal behavioral science, and
Hmm.
then you went forward to study the social sciences and study human behavior. How have those two things interacted in your experience?
So it's like I say. So to one area that I didn't actually say about was I had a bit of a joining degree, which was the master's, which was in project management. But that was really a taste of human behavior, I would say, because it's the social structures that make up behavior. It's the businesses,
Mhm.
HR, the various different procedures that dictate how we work, behave, and learn. And it was interesting because I was seeing examples of the social groups that the corporate world wants to deliver, but not basically the same, but doing a lot of parallels with animal behavior and the types of very hierarchical societies. Obviously, it's how we live and how we all of our social structures are built. I mean, they did sprinkle in a few like heterarchic uh, theories in there, but I will say you're talking if it's 95% hierarchical and 5% heterarchical. And I mean, I like heterarchic theories. They work in a lot of ways, but one of the things that I found really interesting was when we think about how individuals interact with the world around us, stimulus response chains and so on, we aren't that dissimilar from animals. We might do more complex behaviors, but largely we follow similar pathways. If we're comfortable, we're happy, we continue to pursue that comfort. If we're uncomfortable, we avoid where we can. Some individuals, you could argue, in their career, I would say evidence fight, flight, and freeze. The individuals who have been there for donkey's years, who seem, I hate my job, I hate this, who just simply don't move because they can't do anything else with it, or you have those who fight against the system, who either progress through that and change the system, or as often happens, they end up being kicked out of the system, or
Mm.
you have the flighty individuals who move from one job to the next, and it's really interesting that you see it in the job market, you see it in the academic disciplines as well, where unfortunately I would say the only key difference I would say in the animal to human behavior is the social structure of how humans see other humans. And that's where you
Mm.
have the isms, the genderisms, the racisms, the sexism, all of those types of biases that if you're an individual who's going into a particular field, and let's say, as I said at the start, I've got dyspraxia, which is a learning difference, and in a lot of cases, there is a approach to that where you have oh well, everyone should be able to do pipetting in a lab type thing, and it's you're wrong if you're different, and
Hmm.
that can be the same case for whatever it is. If you are as I am, if I was to raise my voice in a meeting, I would be it'd be largely fine. But if I was to raise my if I was there with a colleague who's from another ethnic background, they'd be labeled as the loud person in the room, the disruptive element, and it's those types of things where I would say the human behavior is detrimental because we bring it on ourselves. And I'm not saying the individuals themselves do, but societal structures bring it into play where we're pitted against each other. And there's a number of different moral reasons why that's wrong, but that's, I would say, the sharpest contrast between animal and human. Animals don't
Yeah.
judge based on that.
Yeah, animals don't have patriarchy and capitalism to contend
Exactly.
with. Well, one of the things that was really interesting to me in the articles that you sent was the term identity production, because I in my research I'm looking at identity formation and identity presentation.
Hmm.
So how we pull in things from around us to inform who we are, but also how we adjust ourselves in different situations. And the whole idea of like front of stage, back of stage, Irving Goffman,
Hmm.
identity development, which is actually a name that I scrolled to the end of your articles. I was like, is Goffman gonna be in here? And he wasn't, which is interesting. Um, but yeah, tell me a little bit more about the idea of identity production, because I'm very curious as to the I mean, it's
So,
academia, so we like coming up with different terms for things, but I'm curious as to what the difference is between that and identity formation.
sure. So, one of the main things from a lot of the theories around identity production tends to be centered around it is inherently more, I suppose, towards looking from what the systems do to construct identity. What are the processes? What are the premises? And how is that facilitated? In my own thesis, I use the word facilitator a lot because that was the best
Mm,
example that I could come up with. There is mentorship, but a lot of individuals are facilitating a relationship positively or they're facilitating it negatively. And
mm,
that's not always really conscious. And the whole premise of more of an identity production is around really the basis that it's not necessarily something that you can consciously pursue, and it's not something that you can
mm.
necessarily. Your identity is being formed around you without your conscious choice, such as
Interesting.
you're brought up in an experience. Let's say if you take the best example would be is if you have uh, two or three people who are basically being raised or being taught by someone, and they see a number of bad habits. You'll have one who will rebel against the system because they've seen that bad habit and they want to stamp it out and change it. You'll have one who will agree with it, and then you'll have one who just suffers. And
Mm,
those three experiences are different, but the stimulus is the same. And
mm,
the main the main development or production point basis of that is largely that those individuals aren't consciously choosing to be accepting, fighting, confrontational, or they are potentially suffering through it. They are in those positions because of the experience themselves. So it's not necessarily a conscious choice. I mean, we do have conscious choice as well there, where we can choose. I want to pursue that opportunity. I want to pursue that opportunity, and the premise of having just three people raised by one person and dictated in that
Hmm.
way is more of a loose analogy, because that isn't, as I'm sure you found, that isn't how any identity is produced, because you have the media, you have society, you have teachers, parents, you have various other people around you, friends, family, peers, whatever, who all influence that. But the main premise of the production side is really how your opinions are getting informed by that, and not, I would say it typically breaks down to two sides. Which is probably where the two theories are very close together. How you perceive yourself,
Hmm.
and how you present yourself to other people, and then the
Hmm.
relationship between those 2 points, which I would say from any form of identity theory that I've come across, it's the mechanism that differs, not necessarily the process, I would say.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
makes
definitely the feeling that I was getting from the articles was there was a lot more um there was a lot more internalization of what's going on and focus on the psychological aspects of it, rather than, in my research, I'm coming at it from a sociological and communications point of view. So I'm looking at like context and how people perform themselves in different contexts, and situations where maybe you have audience members or actors from multiple parts of your life in the same room, and suddenly you have that context collapse because some people will know one thing about you and other people will know another, and then they start talking to each other, and you lose that facade that you've kind of built up. So it's really interesting that this is much more, even though there are social components and um uh, interactional components to identity production, it does seem to have a much more importance is placed more on the psychological aspects of it than on the sociological aspects.
Yeah, so one of the theories I would say that really underpins this, or the principal theory that in my approach underpins this, is so you do have Bandora's one who would be a prime example of this. The other one would be Holland. So
Mhm.
Holland is I would say, the building block of where I built the rest of my theoretical framework from. And her approach was very much around, here are the various different spheres of what are possibly components of your identity, and here are how each of them are basically firing all the time at you as an individual, and how you're effectively flowing through your life and developing. And at one point, let's say your professional self might be the dominant sphere, how you're seen in work. It might be how you are seen in an element of your personal self that might be more dominant in a particular moment, and those spheres constantly are growing, shrinking, and changing as you go through various different points. The only criticism I had of Holland's work was around classism. She
Mhm.
completely disregarded classism, and the only reason why I think that's important is it's another, like you said, it's another social lens that we see ourselves in, and particularly she was coming at it from a very Marxist theoretical perspective, where class should be abolished. But regardless of whether it should or shouldn't be abolished, we live in a largely class-based society, especially in the West, where you have systems where people might say, particularly in my research area, where people are talking about academic opportunities and those type of areas. If you have parents who have been through university, and I can think of this forward, if I'm in the future at some point have a child who pursues university. My experience was neither of my parents went to university. I don't know the systems, so I'm having to explore and understand this for the first time. And you don't want to ask the stupid question because you don't want to come off like you don't know what you're talking about, and that's the premise
Mhm.
is there. I do think that is one area where I do think AI does clarify for a lot of students very helpfully on, but where they can ask it
Mhm.
a stupid question and not feel the judgment from it.
Yeah.
But I would say, looking forward, if I was to have a child in the future, the the fact that I've gone through university, if they choose to, I can understand the premise of what's going on and the language there to give them that advantage. Whether or not the other side of that is obviously your individual social network, and that I don't think you can put down purely to race, gender, ethnicity, because
Yeah.
sure they come into factors in that, but that is a your especially in my work, the class is inherently linked to your professional work, and you can't disassociate the two just because of a more of a preference that you would think it should be abolished. And I'm not saying I have studied a lot of class-based research, but I would strongly suggest I would be more than happy if we got away from it as close to a class-based society as we have. But that's the system we are, and I'm a realist in that respect.
Oh no, I fully agree, and I think that academia as a whole has an issue with classism in the not discussing of it. Um, because I mean, it's understandable because for hundreds of years, the only people who were being educated were the wealthy, were the highly networked, well-to-do people who had the means to send their children to school, and had the time and the the ability to spend the resources to sit in a library and read and sit in classrooms rather than working just to support themselves. So I think academia just has this built-in under or this built-in thinking that class doesn't exist because the circles that it's created don't have to deal with that for the most part, or haven't to up till this point. I can think of many instances in many classes where I've had to raise my hand and be like, this is a very privileged conversation. Can we take a step back and talk about how this applies to poor people or people without the means that you are assuming in this conversation? Um, but yeah,
Completely.
building off of your comment, you mentioned vocabulary, and I thought that was a really interesting point in the articles too, is that vocabulary is such a sticking point that keeps people from being part of these spaces and keeps people from understanding themselves and how they function, because they can't describe what they're going through. Um, they can't necessarily label who they are, what they are for other people's benefit. But then as well, being in a space where these big words are being used and these really foundational words to academia are, they're just so esoteric sometimes that it keeps people out of the room almost purposefully.
Oh yeah, and I would completely agree. There's a lot of cases where the vocabulary is purely used to gatekeep because the individual isn't going to want to say, okay, so what did you mean by that? Because you instantly come across like, oh, the rest of the room, even if they don't know either, we've all been in that classroom environment where the rest of the room looks at you and goes, you didn't know what they meant? You absolute. And you think, yeah, even if they are in the same boat as you, they won't admit it, and then it's the all eyes on you, the spotlight above you, and most people won't put themselves in that position unless, again, they're in a really privileged position where they feel their voice can resonate and have that impact, and most people suffer in silence.
Yeah, I remember that in my first communications course in my master's that I just finished, we were talking about semiotics, and I had honestly never heard the word before, and they kept saying it over and over and over again. I finally, near the end of the class, was just like, what what does this word mean? I have no clue what you're talking about. And the professor just looked at me like, you're in a communications degree, how do you not know what semiotics is?
Exactly.
And I'm like, I came from music, like this is a change of scenery for me. So even though I've been in academia I didn't even have the vocabulary because I was new to that sector of academia. So it really is, there are privileges afforded to those who know the words to use to get it through the door.
But I would also argue, and we're both at different stages of our academic journey as it stands. You're applying
Hmm.
for your PhDs, I'm applying for
Yeah.
fellowships, but they're prime examples of
Hmm.
most people I speak to who are first generation, I would say specifically, but even outside the first generation camp, this happens. Is when you ask them, okay, so what are you doing next? Then they say, okay, I'm doing research, the research track, or I'm doing the teaching and scholarship track. Okay, so there's two tracks. What are the difference between the two tracks? And you think, yeah, that's a fundamental point that most people don't understand. Then you have masters, MRes, you have MSci's, the various abbreviations, and no one wants to go, okay, so this is the degree I'm doing. But what
Hmm.
does the title mean?
Yeah.
Because you would sound like an idiot, unfortunately,
Hmm.
saying it. And same for bachelor's degrees, undergrad. They functionally mean the same thing, but then you have within that foundation degrees, access qualifications. Not hasn't necessarily got that support structure to guide them through it. I'll be complete equally. It's like placements, internships, all those type of things. There's language that are very jargonistic, which the
Hmm.
individuals might go, the institution, sorry, might say, oh yeah, well you should do your internship or your placements throughout these points in your program. Okay, but for someone who doesn't know what that is, if you say internship opportunity, they don't know that it's important to do between year one and year two. They find
Hmm.
out from you in year three that it's great and they should have done one. That's fantastic for them to know that in hindsight. Or the same thing is, oh, have you applied for such and such fellowship? Oh no, I didn't know what a fellowship is, or I don't know what I'm doing post PhD. All of those things
Hmm.
are really important specific language, and sometimes I would say it's subtle. Like I'm not sure if you've come across it with the application process for the PhD, but you have project and you have program, which
Hmm.
you still graduate with the same qualification, but they mean something very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like those labels are so, it's so frustrating. Even the names of the departments and the names of the different, I'm forgetting the words for it, but just knowing what you want to study. Like I remember in my undergrad, I ended up just doing music because I was really interested in sociology, but I thought I was interested in psychology. And so
Mhm.
I took a Psych 101 course and was just like, oh, I hate this. I don't care how the human brain works. Like, why are we discussing this? This is not what I'm interested in. And I told my advisor that, and he was like, well, I guess you should just stay with music then. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
fine. Instead of saying, oh, you're talking about how communities function, this here, sociology is what you're really interested in. Let's talk about how people relate to each other. Um, and so even in that, the language barrier kept me from what I wanted to do for a good 15, 16 years because I just didn't know the name for it. I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. Um, and it's, yeah, it's just wild that it, the ability to understand even what people want to study or how to get that foot in the door is so gate kept.
Yeah, like you say, I know from obviously the UK is slightly different in terms of our classes. So, like you just said, you had like Psych 101. We don't really have the 101 classes. We have to traditionally pick our subjects. We have the same core subjects, unfortunately, though, going all the way from primary school basically to high school. We then
Mhm.
start picking our courses at high school, but the various offshoots from those subjects aren't made clear completely the same as what you articulated because our typical subjects are you do have art, you have music, design and technology, geography, history, you have the what are more the arts and humanities. Then you have science, which up till the end of high school incorporates the chemistry, biology, and physics, maths, English lit, English language. But you have all of that. You're going through that process, and then, okay, so I'm deciding on the various different topics or disciplines. You don't know what sociology is till college because it's which A levels do you want to do? Sociology, photography, anthropology, psychology. You might have a humanities, classics, all those types of elements that are thrown in. Plus, within the science, you have environmental science and so on and so on. But you're having all those various very specific A levels, and you think, I have no idea what half of these mean. And then the other side
Mm-hmm.
of the challenge, which I think is a problem for most students, if I'm very interested in the environment and I'm very green fingered or those type of areas where I'm really interested in saving the planet, let's say, I'm looking at
Mm-hmm.
what A levels I can do, or which is our college qualification, and you think, okay, there's an ecology A level or there's a geography A level. Now, most people will probably go, okay, I don't know what ecology is. There's an environmental degree, not a degree, environmental A level. I'll do that because environmental A level, environmental interest, yeah, that works. But what they don't tell you, what the descriptions don't tell you, is geography would cover a lot of that, but it would also cover the human and the environmental factors. Whereas the environmental studies might go through the chemical makeup of the soil, which is, and then like similar to what you were saying about the psychology in music, is the student might go through that experience and go, I really hate soil. Why on earth have I picked this? I hate this. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
because what they're interested in is wrong. It's what the module or the subject is teaching them that is not where they're supposed to be. But because the title sounds that way, they're pulled towards that subject. And it's like, oh, well, yeah. So this isn't what I want to do. Then they have a complete, I would say, fracture of spirit where they don't know. Okay, what do I do now? What I thought I wanted to do for the last 16 years isn't
Mm-hmm.
relevant anymore. And I think the only time you have the exception of that, as I'm sure you have friends who were in the same position, is the ones who want to be go into law, into medicine, and so on. The
Yeah.
very specific disciplines
Yeah.
where, yeah, you just go through and follow it.
I mean, yeah, it bringing up geography, I didn't even know what geography was as a study as a whole until like last year. Like in my mind, geography was just, oh, it's maps and
Exactly.
cartography and like things like that, not thinking about, oh, migrations and how land masses actually function with each other and thing like totally never even crossed my mind. And to think in the UK that someone was telling me about GCSEs and A levels the other day too, and it boggles my mind that you all have to choose these things when you're teenagers.
Hmm.
Like I didn't even make up my mind really about what I wanted to do until I was like 30.
And this is, yeah, and I do think that is a problem for it is a problem in our system. In one respect, that's where when I've spoken to a lot of US interested students who are interested in PhDs and so on, or interested in our degrees, and I would actually say to most US based students who are, as there are a growing number at the moment, for reasons I'm sure we can all think of why they're going to pursue degrees internationally. And our bachelor's degree, because they have an element of research in that,
Mm-hmm.
that can become more accessible for either masters or for PhDs, and in some cases, what the US college system can, because it's more,
Mm-hmm.
the credit system works great in other ways, but it doesn't really demonstrate your acumen as a researcher. And
Yeah.
there's pros and cons of both systems, but yeah, the fact that you have to have a very clear picture of what you want to do, and even if that individual is trying to keep very generalized, it's
Mm-hmm.
next to impossible to keep themselves so generalized that they can change their mind at that
Yeah.
late stage and go, okay, I thought I was interested in medicine, but I haven't got the grades or whatever, and I want to pursue English literature. oh, but you didn't do it in English Lit A level or GCSE. Well, I didn't know I wanted to do that. Well, you're all science heavy, so why would we let you onto a
Mm.
I will say, for those potentially listening, it's far easier to go from this, what I've found from STEM to the social sciences, humanities, and
Mm.
arts than it is to do the reverse. Uh,
Yeah.
but it is still, some places can be very elitist with
Oh
that
yeah.
and say, well, you've done biology. What relevance did that have with with classical theories and so on, or with
Mm.
philosophy? And it's like, well, you can just kind of give them a chance, especially at certain points with the bachelor's degree. Maybe not with a PhD in it, but
Yeah.
you could give. They can retrain or can try for an undergrad. A lot of the entry requirements could be less rigid at the undergraduate level. Could be.
Yeah. Well, I think that also plays into how much importance Western culture puts on STEM right now, especially at
Hmm.
least in America. I don't know about the UK, but I would assume it's probably very similar.
Yeah.
That STEM is very, very focused on in school. In the US, it's because they wanted people. The education system was invented post World War One, so that they could create a proletariat that they could put into factories as quickly as they
Hmm.
could if war broke out again, which it did, and World War II happened. And oh, look, we have people who can go work in factories. Great. We did our job. And then they've never updated the education system since. So there's this intense focus on STEM. And so when you have that and you try to go from a humanities to a STEM, there's this like, oh, but you don't work as hard. Like, the I even found myself with my last master's degree thinking, oh, it was just a master of music. I didn't really work that hard. I was just kind of warming a seat for 2 years. And thinking
Mm.
back on it, I was like, I was learning physics and I was like teaching students and teaching vocabulary and history and all of these like really important subjects. It just happened to be focused around music and geared towards music, but I was like, no, it's whatever. It was just a music degree, completely undercutting the fact that I had done a master's degree. And that's hard work for anyone in any degree because there's that societal bias.
And yeah, I completely agree. And you do hear it a lot. Thankfully, I would say the personal experience of it has been, I'm maybe because I've come from more of a STEM field, I've had less of it. But I can remember I was applying where you do, and uh, for anyone who's pursuing post PhD work, you will have this experience where you have to do the informal inquiries, you contact the various people, and you ask them about the job and find out various different things about it. And same as you'll have for applying for PhDs. And one of the people who I reached out to, I gave them my pitch, my research idea, and the response was laughable. If you didn't have, I would say, a thick skin, which I think is essential in academia,
Mhm.
it would completely decimate some people because it's like, oh, I'm only interested in serious research, and it's like, so okay, fab, and it's like,
Yeah.
and you think to yourself, well, you could have just said. The argument of just if that's the case, even ghosting someone would be better than saying, "Oh yeah, your work's basically awful. No point in that." Don't get me wrong. Other people, same project, have absolutely loved the pitch,
Mhm.
but it's the fact that you think to yourself, why just because it's not something that you're interested in does it
Mhm.
and there are scientists like this unfortunately and scholars like this. I've met those on the humanities camp who view quantitative as absolutely awful types of research methods to use, and I've met definitely far more on the more STEM focus who, oh, you can't do qualitative research; it's not worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, do do none of you recognize interdisciplinary research? The amount of things that happen, it's like people will go, oh, well, you need all the biology can prove all of this with statistics. Yes, but you need a political scientist to get a piece of paper through various societies to actually implement the idea.
Yeah.
And that's going to largely be qualitative interviews. It's not going to be, oh, well, we can show them the statistics. They won't read the bloody statistics. And if
And people watching the news won't care about the statistics. They just care about the feeling they get when they watch a politician.
yeah, exactly. And so you need, like you say, communication majors. You need people
Mm-hmm.
who have got backgrounds in psychology, sociology. All of these elements come in
Mm-hmm.
together to really bring that policy through. But then you have the what I would say is the disciplinary elitists who are like, no, biology, this, physics, this, humanities are all supposed to be separate, and we all have our various different areas which are our focus. And it's like you really realize how dogmatic and archaic a lot of this sounds because
Yeah.
there's no reason for it. Most of the I would say most of the scientists who I've met there or scholars that I've met that have inspired me since doing my PhD have got at least a toe in interdisciplinary research.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, going back to your comment about needing a thick skin, I this is going to be my second year applying to PhD programs, and my first round, actually I guess it's technically my third year applying, but my first year was years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
abandoned that search. I decided I didn't want to do it. But last year, my dream school sent me a rejection letter and honestly very helpfully said exactly why they didn't accept my research proposal. But because they were academics, they didn't mince words and they just looked at it very like scientifically, like these are
Yeah,
the reasons. And it was basically just like, you don't know anything. Like we don't want you
that,
because you clearly don't know what you're talking about here. And I was just like, okay, let me sit with this for a day and break down a little bit and then come back and take it as constructive and move forward. But yeah,
nah.
it can be brutal.
But just as another example on that, and this is potentially something to make both of us feel a bit better. I saw a scientist I follow, unfortunately I can't remember their surname, was publishing a paper. They had typical as there's countless memes about reviewer two criticizing whatever paper is
Mhm.
published, and this reviewer two said, "We think you should cite more of this person's research. This person is the expert in the field. You need to do this." It was a blind research submission, and this scientist's response to reviewer two, "I am that person." You're telling me to cite more of my own work. I am that person. I'm deliberately not citing all of my own work because, and it's like this is the comment underneath, and this is why double blind uh, research submissions don't always work because I'm
Yeah.
being told to cite more of my own research when I'm the person who's wrote it.
I mean, I will say I read into a lot of articles, especially during my thesis. I ran into a lot of articles where authors were citing themselves quite often and multiple articles of themselves within an article. But that was because I was studying a new branch of theory that
Hmm.
only like 5 people had written on. So they had to be like, I already wrote on this. Please just go read this so I don't have to say it again.
And this is the thing you're told not to really. Oh, it'd be poor academic practice to
Oh, yeah.
populate it with your own research. But the fact, like you say, if it's a new or emerging field, you've got no other choice than to, because
Yeah.
otherwise you'd be citing things that are so tangentially connected that it wouldn't be relevant. But like you say, the fact is, it does the fact that academia to different points, and you almost question the point. Has the person who's actually made this comment thought about what their comment actually says?
Yeah.
And half the time, you would like to think they probably haven't, which makes me feel a little bit better.
Hmm. Yeah, they're just commenting off the cuff. They aren't the ones who have spent years researching to write the article. They're the one that read it once and said, I'd fix this and this and this and this. Like
Hmm.
that helps kind of reel it back in and bring the reality back to the work rather than feeling put upon. But so backing up into your actual research field, although this is all tangential, but something that I found really interesting in the articles that you sent was in talking to students, the it sounded like they were more interested in careers that produce personal rewards rather than anything extrinsic. So rather than financial or like stability, they were looking for things that fed them. I guess you could say spiritually, but like fed their emotional state and their well-being, their inner well-being rather than their external well-being. And that was so fascinating to me.
Yeah, so all three of the papers, I would say, fundamentally look at uh, fulfillment rather than success.
Mm,
And which is a fascinating premise, but basically summed up, it's the whole argument that everyone always says to you when you're growing up, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life type argument. And it's how
mhm,
to go about that. And it's not to say there's certain elements where you're going to have to compromise because you
mhm,
like this, but this is slightly more paid. Do you want the slightly more pay, but it's still in a field that you roughly like? Then you make
mm,
the compromise of pay to get the rest of the stuff. But the argument being that how someone should pursue their career, if they're doing all these qualifications, it should be something that they're interested in, hopefully that they're good at, and it brings them some form of gratification, rather than
yeah,
how we structure a lot of the presentation of the education system, which is these subjects are really well paid and really valued. These subjects aren't. If you're good at them, then you're going to be unsuccessful. If you're good at these, you're going to be great. If you therefore might be good at these, the ones that are valued, do this instead, and then you'll be
mhm,
more successful because there's just a plethora of opportunities there, which we now are seeing the blatant disregard that that's not true. That a lot of these fields, the jobs only still exist if you're really top of your game at it.
yeah,
And yeah, okay, that means there is still jobs there, but that doesn't mean the individual. You're basically saying the individuals who are great at those subjects are also the individuals who love a lot of the subjects in a lot of cases,
mm,
and that's the whole argument that I think really interestingly comes from researchers who I would say have wrote a lot of papers on management theory as well, rather than
mm,
not
mhm,
rather than just looking at identity. They've also leaned more into the corporate world and saying like this is how you motivational theory, how you can motivate your staff, all those types of ideas, which traditionally are very separate. It's like motivational theory, you have it, this is how you manage your staff, this is how you manage your workforce, this is productivity goals and all that type of thing. And I would say was refreshing to see the seeping in of the more behavior and identity side rather than the purely business economic theories approach. But the other one that I thought was uh, an interesting way of looking at it is, and from a creative's point of view, I'd imagine the same would be the case for music as it was for the art-based research method that was used in Quinlan's work. Uh, their approach was to look at a river. Your career is a river. It goes through various different points in your and when the student articulated that river, they basically are giving a truer version of events because if we're talking as an interview, we're still thinking. We're still
mhm,
we're registering what the other person has said. We're responding in kind. All the various social paradigms are going on behind closed doors that's informing what we say. Whereas
mhm,
if you draw it, the squiggles that you put on, the pen to paper, the direction that those squiggles take, the description that you attach to it, it's organic because
mhm,
your brain is it's more flowing it onto the page rather than thinking about it. You are thinking about it, but you're not. The bias that you have when you talk isn't necessarily expressed in when you're drawing or when you're
yeah.
writing a song or whatever. I think the creative space for that type of thing, very interesting thing to analyze, but from my own research methods employing something similar, but very interesting approach, which really personifies how we see it and then getting the individual to reflect on it, I think is really useful.
Well, and I also think that this is kind of the basis for a lot of generational infighting between especially like boomers generation and then millennials because of how they view those jobs and their function in those jobs, in that the boomer generation generally saw a job as something that you just had to do, and you were usually pretty good at it because you worked your way up from the bottom and you just knew how those systems worked, and so you just worked your way up and you worked your way up, and it was just a job, and then you went home and did the things you liked to do.
Mm-hmm.
Versus millennials who are sitting here like, no, no, no. I'm not going to spend that much of my day doing something that I don't like and I don't get fulfillment out of. And so we're seeing more millennials, I guess they're calling it job hopping, because they're dissatisfied with either the treatment or with the fulfillment they get from the work that they're doing. And so it's causing people to butt heads because they see their career having different purposes. And
I'm
it's just
yeah. Hmm. I was just gonna say, do you not objectively, do you think I've done a lot of like general research around the area where
mhm,
the social structures that were there for the boomers,
mhm.
the Gen Xers, doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, that was kind of something that I was studying in my thesis, because it was focused on millennials, and I think I'll probably end up studying millennials for the rest of my life. Partially because I am one, but partially because I think millennials, they exemplify a certain shift in generational thinking that other living generations don't. In that millennials, the internet didn't hit the millennial generation until we had already gone past the like the personality formation part of our lives. Like, we didn't get social media until we were teenagers. So we had a period of 12 to 16 years where um we were forming those in-person relationships. If we wanted to talk to someone, we had to talk to them on a landline. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
we the, we learned how to communicate with each other because we were constantly in the same room with the person that we were communicating, rather than now we have online communication for the most part. There is still, obviously, we still communicate with each other in person, but what I found was that millennials see the internet as augmentation rather than younger generations that see the internet as reality.
Mm-hmm.
So millennials are this weird like in between point where they've seen both sides of it. And so the commentary that they provide is really fascinating. And I think that really shifted what millennials want out of life, because we were able to see that connection form in actual reality rather than virtual reality, and then
Mm-hmm.
use the virtual in order to augment that. So in our workspaces, we're still looking for real human connection, because we've seen the other side of that, and it has informed how we interact. Like, we've seen that shift from the warmth to the cold, and we are averse to living completely online, and so we expect more out of our living situations and our working situations because we've had that comparison.
Yeah, and I think I think just picking up on another side of that is, whilst I agree there's a comparison, more thinking, I suppose, from the how the social structures have changed
Mm,
predominantly. You're similar to what you said earlier in the conversation, where you said or alluded to the whole if you work hard, you'll be successful.
mm-hmm,
That is a whilst it's still presented as a valid case to do, it's largely been disproven by successive generations. After all,
yeah,
maybe not all millennials, but certainly Gen Z are going to be are also dubbed Generation Rent because they're the first generation that is unlikely to own a house. Generations after
yeah,
this are unlikely to earn the same amount as what their parents earned. for the first time ever.
Yeah.
So hard work isn't getting you jack.
Yeah.
Then there's the argument of, well, work smart, and you can get there with that. And then there's but then you have different people saying, oh, well, AI can do this for you for no time at all. So what's the point in working smart if a machine can do it for you? And
Mm,
it's the argument of, if you can't earn it through hard work, you can't earn it through smart work, what option do you have? And I think for me, I see that as, you've almost got to do, well, don't chase success because of working hard or working smart. Chase it because you want it.
absolutely.
And it's not the material goods that you're seeking. Yeah, there will be certain things that comes into that, and I can imagine hearing different people saying, "Well, what are you even alluding to?" More of a philosophical view. But if you pursue want and something, you build a brand, you build a community, you enjoy that, and one thing that I do still think is refreshing is community still sells, community still builds. You can
Hmm.
have various different things where we're having this conversation because of a community on an app that is largely built for, let's be completely blunt about it, is for largely selling various different cheap products and supplements, and that is
Oh
the
yeah,
whole.
social media is a capitalistic game. It's not actually invented to connect people. People connecting is merely a byproduct of social media.
Yeah, and if that connection, let's be honest, didn't fulfill their goal, that we would all be in virtual silos working uh,
Hmm.
for the algorithm, which
Yeah. I
but
mean,
I
I
think,
one could argue we still are, but but
yeah,
that's a different
potential.
conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there is the argument for that, but I do think it's, if you pursue something that you love and it's something that you're really happy in, and I do think the only people I don't think that are taking absolutely zero responsibility for this, there are people researching and looking at various different things, saying these are what are the generational changes, these are the various different factors that are going on, but there's very few people who are actually saying there has been a shift in the workplace, so we now need to change certain things of how we approach it. And it's like, oh no, the workplace is fine, keep the workplace as it is. It's like, yeah, but everyone's telling you that because you've got rid of the end of service full salary pension, that the pension is now not as attractive. That you want to get rid
Yeah.
of flexible working, but you don't want that because you want to manage people in the office. You don't want you want people to be 20 minutes away from the office or so on, and all that type of thing. Do you not see how some of these factors are impeding what you want, which is success for your business? I do think, unfortunately, the downside is was also becoming more truthful for that with AI, is they don't really want to do any of these things. They're doing. There's a few
Hmm.
companies that do it because they want to. Most companies are doing it because they have to, and it's the only way of making their money. If they have an option of cutting the employee out altogether, and
They will.
but
Yeah.
they will. And I think the other side of that is, no one, the penny hasn't dropped on the other side of that, where you still need someone to buy the thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
And to babysit it.
yeah, and that, yeah,
I mean, there's an old movie musical called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And it's about this guy who wants a job. And so he finds this book that basically tells him, just walk in and pretend like you work there until they put you on payroll. And then all of a sudden you work there. And then you just pretend to have the job that you want as you work your way up to the ladder. And by the end of the show, he has worked himself up to CEO just because he's pretending that those are the jobs, and he meets the right person. He's just like, oh yeah, I work here. Oh yeah, I'm this manager. Oh yeah, I do this. And I think there was a time, at least in American history, where you could do that. Like there was a time where corporations were so big and had so many people that you could talk yourself into a job, but that does not exist anymore. And so I think that's why we have a lot more people looking for jobs that are fulfilling, and jobs that can, like you were saying, jobs that can make us feel a part of something and feel fulfilled, since the perks aren't there, and the perks probably will never be there, especially in America, as looking down the barrel of not having social security payments, and most people under the age of Gen X are never going to see retirement. We're looking for something that we can enjoy now, since we know there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
I think, like you say, I think across the world, I think state pensions, which is similar to your social security, the amount of people who are of the impression, well, we keep saying, oh, we need to prop up this, prop up that, and a lot of the younger generations are saying, well, what's the point? Because we know that it's not we're either going to be too old to use it, or we're not. It's not going to exist anyway. So why should we, in the same respect, fund your retirement when we aren't going to get one? And I think there is definitely intergenerational strife, which I think unfortunately does exist and is a problem. And I do think, unfortunately, I'd say laziness of politicians isn't addressing the issue and the level of discontent that we have. I think outside of maybe the Scandinavian countries, which are generally speaking happier, and they're generally happier, unfortunately, from what most people take the view of. It's not because they earn a lot of money, it's because generally their level of worry and their safety net is bigger. And because their safety net is bigger to prop people up, they feel more secure, so they take more risks, and they can, but they don't need to be, this is my fancy car, this is my big house. Most of the time, they're largely, not all of them, but there is a element of minimalism with a lot of, hence with, well, IKEA is the definition of minimalist furniture.
I mean, the history of Social Security in the US, it was only supposed to last for a few years anyway. FDR created it as part of his New Deal post World War II as a way to make sure that soldiers would have income after the war. Like it was not Social Security was basically built in the same way that a lot of like temporary houses are built. Like it was supposed to be there for a few years. It wasn't super well thought through because he wasn't intending it to last now 80 years in the future. And so part of me is just like, yeah, we should get rid of that system because it wasn't built for this. We could create a new, better system that would be built for that. But yeah, I definitely think that's a huge factor as to backing up why so many people are looking for degrees that allow them to go into careers that they really enjoy and trying to find fulfillment in their degree rather than, oh, I'm just going to go get a business degree and see what happens after, which I was told as a kid, that's the safety net. That's what you do is you get a business degree or a communications degree, then you can get whatever job you want after because it's a general enough degree that anyone will hire you. But
could you just can we just hold the thought? I'm just having a builder's knock at the door. I'll be 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
That hopefully you didn't have too much of the sound effect of my dog barking.
No, totally fine.
Good.
Okay, so I mean that was actually a great place to have that happen because it's easily edited out. So yeah, that was I and that's where my brain just stops working. Um, but yeah, I think that's where students are finding courage in going for degrees that they enjoy, and that lead to careers that are fulfilling, because they don't see the same type of future that previous generations have seen. So therefore, we need something more out of academia, and we need more out of the jobs that we take post academia,
Hmm.
to fulfill us, because there's not that promise of you work 20 years and then you can retire and find that fulfilling life after.
Well, it's like, let's be honest. I think with the it is a logical fallacy that when if you were to say to someone, you go and work in business, work in science, work in product design, create a business, whatever, uh, that's how you'll be successful. Versus now, I would actually argue in a lot of cases, the authentic experience that was largely dismissed, it was certainly dismissed when we were going through school, the whole YouTube generation of
Mm-hmm.
influencers and so on. And I'm not saying, okay, everyone go and be an influencer, but the fact that a lot of what, not all, and I'm not saying the influencers who are not really famous for being for anything, but those who have, even the ones who have, for argument's sake, focused on painting or gaming or whatever they
Mm-hmm.
focused on, and they built their entire brand around that type of thing. I don't think the funny side necessarily is the most relevant because I think they're very boom and bust. They have one funny moment, they have a
Yeah.
few funny moments to follow, and then it's bust after that. But the ones who have built their brand entirely around reviewing games, there's a YouTuber in the UK whose entire brand and all he does is goes up and down the country looking at various different trains, review and highlighting how his fascination and his love of that, and he
Mm-hmm.
makes a living off just looking at various different trains, and it's like that's because it's authentic. It's something that
Yeah.
he's interested in, that he loves to do, and it's his pure focus. He's made a success of it, and to me, that's an argument of. I know people will say, "Well, not everyone can do that." No, not everyone can do that. But the argument of you don't know if you can do that if you kill your dreams.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's that the argument is if you enjoy teaching, teach. If you enjoy being helping people and you want to go into medicine, do that. There's no reason why any of those should disappear. But if you really enjoy train spotting, bird watching, all those type of things, and that's what gives you the fulfillment, do it. If you need to go and do a degree to give you a bit more of an experience to inform your opinion, do it. If you don't, you don't. I mean, there's
Yeah.
YouTubers and so on that I watch and listen to and so on that are there's the end of the spectrum which are really hard scientists who are uh, pursuing various different areas of academic interest, and on the other side of that you have the individuals who are what's the best way of saying it? I don't want to use the term brain rot, but where they do something that is
Yeah.
that
I
not
mean, there's a need
repetitive
for
but
that
funny.
kind of entertainment.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, let's be honest, there's nothing different than I. This is where I probably have a very unpopular opinion for most. When a lot of people say, "Why would you play games, watch various different people doing various things like that?" And my argument is always, you watch people play sports, which is
That part.
the exact same argument of watching someone compete in something that, in theory, is played again and again and again and again, where the goal is one person wins, one person loses, or one team. Unfortunately, sport, in my view, is exactly the same thing. Some people go, oh, yeah, well, I've been watching it for 25, 30 years. And,
Sports is just another form of theater. It's just the
yeah,
theater of, I mean, I I have a long a long diatribe on that I won't go into. But yeah, it's just another form of entertainment.
yeah. And like you say, I think for me, I would never dismiss anyone's hobby or interest because of that. But I do find it, again, another logical fallacy that people can say, oh, people shouldn't be into gaming, into painting, into reading, into that type of thing. And I'm thinking, you're into something that literally has the same outcome every time. One person wins, one person loses. I, I mean, there is more to it, and I'm not saying that I do watch some sports, and I'm not dismissing it entirely. It is entertaining, but some people are so dogmatic about it that it's like, well,
Yeah.
it's like that is life. And I'm thinking that was arguably worse than someone spending an hour on whatever game or reading X amount of fiction that they're doing, because not you could argue none of the above have any general societal benefit. It's not like unless potentially the painting is displayed in a gallery and has a transformative impact on someone. Reading a book or watching a sports or whatever else is on TV doesn't really have any impact on people outside of your own experience.
I mean, I mean,
Well,
the
it does.
sociologist in me wants to argue that, but no, I understand your point completely, uh, and I'm not going to take away from your point by being pedantic.
No. To be fair, I would agree from a social scientist myself. I would agree. I'm not saying collectively there are certainly not factors that influence that. I mean, tribalism in
Yeah.
sports causes a number of different problems. So I would agree.
Mm.
It's a rather simplistic position, but at the heart of it, I suppose, is if
Yeah.
you're in a position where you have an interest, and if you kept your interest to yourself, as everyone largely wants people to do with various other interests, then at its bare bones, it shouldn't impact other people. We all
Yeah.
know it does, because I mean, the states largely is based on a lot of. If you were to say to most people, what does the states do very well? Your sports competitions are some of the biggest, boldest things in the world, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there.
Although world events, when you're the only country doing it, is a bit of a that shows a geography
Oh,
lacking.
I have never understood that. It's the same thing with being like, uh, the same thing as like Miss Universe. Oh yeah, is there a Martian part of this? Is there like
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
let's figure out our naming systems here. But no, that's yeah, yeah. I just wish everyone could be happy and pursue things that make them happy. But that's just my little optimistic socialist heart that
I
has
think the problem.
trouble accepting reality.
I think the optimism is fine. I think the problem is with a lot of things, and this is what people won't really admit is a lot of people want people to be happy, but a lot of people want people to be happy, but they want people to be happy in the way that they like to be happy, which doesn't
Exactly.
work. Or in
Yep.
some cases, and there is a group of people like this, some people just want people to be miserable. And
Yep.
there is, unfortunately, I would like to say, as I've
Yep.
grown up, a higher number of that camp than I would ever have liked to admitted when I was younger. But there is a lot of people who would prefer people to be absolutely miserable, and they present it as they don't, but they do, and their actions definitely do it.
Yep. And a lot of them are in politics. And with
I would say
that,
most of them, yeah, yeah, most of them are.
and with that, this brings us to our synthesis questions because we've been going for a while, and I have a feeling we could continue going for a very long while. So I think
Quite possibly.
we should move forward. So the synthesis questions are a chance for me to ask all of my guests the same questions because um, I like to gather intelligence. So the first question, and I don't want you to think too hard about these, so just
Hmm.
whatever comes first to mind. First question is, what is your typical executive dysfunction and or rest day activity?
Uh, I'm very into spas, and I go to the gym. I do a bit of a workout in the gym. Then I spend quite a large amount of time hot tub sauna steam room.
The best kind of a day. The best kind of a day. What is your favorite setting for working on your research?
Outdoors where possible, or at least with a view of the outdoors, because in the UK the weather is atrocious. So at least somewhere looking out the window.
Hmm. Always a good choice. What is one thing an advisor has told you that has stuck with you? And this could be good or bad.
So it's not an advisor, but this is an example of someone in my undergrad actually. The best way to be secure in yourself is to not rely on any one form of income or support for everything.
Mm, that's good advice that I should follow. Um, if you could choose any other area of research, what would you choose and why?
Any other area? I think realistically, I would probably do more in ecology if I could go back and so on. Even though I still have a foot in it, I would say I'm going further and further away from it. So probably ecology, environmental conservation, those types of areas, because I still enjoy that work. I do feel like I've missed some of the skills now in there, so I'm more one camp over
Mm,
the other. But yeah, probably ecology, conservation, or environmental.
nice. Who is one other academic whose research you really admire?
So I would say there's one who I've cited is Carolyn Quinlan. One of her pieces on the river. I think it's a really interesting view of incorporating more of an art-based approach in there.
Mm,
But I would also like to caveat that with another academic who isn't necessarily their research area, but it's something that they've done a lot of, if you don't mind, is Shane Austin. He's someone I've met a few times and we get on quite well now. Is his work trying to diversify academia, particularly on the award side.
mm,
It's not his primary area of research, but it is something that I think is very, very noble. And he is doing a lot in the University of West Indies as well as in the States to try to make sure that global South voices and minority voices are getting heard. And I think that is something that is so refreshing to see, but it's also he's going about it in a way that is accessible for people who are from more the heteronormative camps.
mm,
Whereas a lot of the criticism normally thrown at initiatives like that is that it by opening the door, trying to open the doors up, it seems from the outside there's closing doors. Where his approach has been, no, you're just presenting more people for the awards. You're finding it, you're
hmm.
helping support them rather than necessarily saying, okay, we're going to have a new category for an award. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's I love that. And I think I am definitely for that. I have been trying to find ways to incorporate research into my work that isn't just from like the US and the UK and Canada. And it's hard. It's very hard because our systems aren't built to give that information to us easily and willingly. So you have to really dig, and it shouldn't be like that. Um, what is a question that you've never been able to answer?
why as a species does humanity enjoy courting disaster?
Mm, the death wish, the thing that a lot of philosophers have tried to figure out.
Yeah, you could say courting
Mm,
disaster or courting unhappiness even, because I
mm,
think both are quite close together at this point.
yeah. Gosh, I love asking that question and I hate asking that question because everyone's answer to it just completely just throws me off for the rest of the day because I just want to think about it. And then finally, what font do you wish you could present your research in?
You know what? Would I'll be really not controversial. I would love to present it in Comic Sans for one particular reason, because I know it would annoy so many different people just because it's Comic Sans that I feel like, and equally, I feel one of the best ways to get your research or get whatever work you've produced recognized is an element of controversy. And I would love to
Mhm.
have the argument of the idea is great, but the font is awful. Why has he done this in such? And the interest is so away from what the subject is, because why has he used Comic Sans? Who uses Comic Sans? What is the point in this? I think it would be a interesting conversation, and I would just love to
Mm.
watch that little grenade go off in the room and just stand there and watch a bit, like if you have your poster and all that there and you're just standing back and going, yeah, this is the type of little bit of anarchy that I enjoy.
I love that. Well, thank you very, very, very much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been so much fun talking to you. And like I said, I feel like we could talk for
Hmm.
hours and hours and hours. So yeah, thank you very much. And we will talk to you all later. Bye. Like I said, this is a lot of what is going to be coming up over and over and over again on this podcast, because it is so important. How students learn, who is in the classroom, who is teaching. Those topics are extremely important and should be at the forefront of our minds at all times, especially as researchers, especially as academics. We should not only be looking for new information and adjusting research and formulating new questions, but we should also be figuring out how best to frame that information in order to disseminate it to students, in order to make sure that people can understand it. Look at me using my big academic words instead of trying to be more understandable. We just, as researchers, need to make sure that our work is understandable for the general public, and that is exactly what Jordon is doing. So thank you so much, Jordon, for joining me on this podcast, and thank you to all of you for joining us in this conversation. If you have questions for any of our guests, we would love to include them in these episodes. We had a whole bunch at the beginning, and now it's dropped off, so please, please, please send in your questions. You can submit those on Instagram at HypothesisPod, or you can email them to us at pod. I'm leaving that in because it was funny. I don't care. You're welcome. You get to keep it. You can also send an email to us with your questions at podcasthypothesis@gmail.com. That's podcasthypothesis@gmail.com. You can also send us audio messages at SpeakPipe. That's speakpipe.com/hypothesispodcast. If you would like to send us an audio message, please make sure you're in a quiet space and keep your messages around 30 seconds or less. But we would love to hear you and love to hear your thoughts and questions and commentary. And it can be about literally anything. It can be about academic topics, or it can be about life in general, or it can be asking advice on applying to school or whether or not you should go on for further degrees. Or, whether or not that GED sitting on your shelf is actually doing you any good. I'm sure one of my guests could answer that question for you. You can also find all of the articles we discuss in today's episode on my Substack. That I can't talk anymore. You're welcome for listening to the rest of this. My Substack is iramcintosh.substack.com. Again, you can find all of the articles discussed in this episode on my Substack, iramcintosh.substack.com. Please follow all of our socials. Like I said, the Instagram is at HypothesisPod. My Instagram is at Ira A. McIntosh. My TikTok is at The Gay Ethnographer. I'm at The Gay Ethnographer everywhere, so please feel free to follow me anywhere. And please, please, please subscribe, download, rate, review all of our episodes. Downloading is what matters. When you listen, don't just listen, please download before you listen to make sure that those numbers show up in our accounts. And please share this podcast with your friends. You all are why we are doing this, so please join us in the task of making sure that everyone has access to good information and access to education. So please, let's fight misinformation together. Have a wonderful day and go read a book.